happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 347 for February the 12th, 2025. My name is Wes Fryer. I am a middle school STEM and media literacy teacher here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Soon to be a AP computer science teacher in a little over a week. But I am joined as always by Dr. Jason Neiffer, who, as you may be able to recognize, because I'm sure you immediately read topographical maps, is hailing from the somewhat chilly state of Montana. How cold is it there, Jason?
Ooh, it was below 20 degrees below zero last night. So pretty intense. And we weren't even the coldest in the state. We were about in the middle. There were some places that got down to negative 40. That's not wind chill, that's negative 40. And then you include the wind chill in, and it's like negative 60. So it's a real iceberg up here. So, but that's okay. I mean, the one thing about Montana is if you stick around here, as I have for the past 51 years, expect some winter, as it turns out.
Gosh, yes. Well, we're below the freezing line here. We're getting quite a bit of heavy rain, but there's ice and snow north of us. And yeah, it's wintertime. We were, 40 degrees warmer, like literally in the 70s, like 3 days ago, I think. So rapid changes. So, well, what do you do, Dr. Neiffer, besides put on, lots of blankets and hunker down this time of year? What do you do for your day job, and what are we up to here?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I even wore flannel to work today, which I don't necessarily do every day, especially since I took my current position. But I am the executive director of Montana Digital Academy, which is Montana State Virtual School located on the beautiful University of Montana campus. I'm not in Missoula tonight. I am at the parental homestead in lovely Great Falls, Montana. But the EdTech Situation Room, I'd love to talk about the weather for an hour, but we have collected some links about stuff that's going on in the world, and we're going to kind of shoot them through the old EduPrism in hopes of providing some insights for our listeners and viewers on how the fast-changing world of technology, which has always been pretty quick-moving but seems to have picked up pace as of late, how that could impact teaching and learning. So you can always grab all of our links at edtechsr.com/links. We have 2 huge Google documents accessible from the one where you can find everything we've talked about going back all 347 episodes. There's also a lot of stuff we don't get to. So if you're just looking for some fodder to read, you can always just check out our links too. But tonight, inevitably, we will talk about some AI. Can't imagine why, but AI is on our radar tonight. Some Google news, some security news, some miscellaneous news, and we'll end our time tonight with our so-called Geeks of the Week, techno fascinations that we share as part of our episode every week. So, Dr. Fryer, is there a place you'd like to start today? I mean, we could probably spend 10 minutes and get every non-AI link waxed off if we want to go in that direction.
We could. Hey, thanks for doing the heavy lifting with the links to this week. I will say, I don't even know when this has happened, but I am 2 days without opening my news feed. So like usually I start my day with Google News, and it's actually been kind of lovely. And I think maybe last week I was like, oh my gosh, how can we talk about other things besides the news? But at this point it's like, this will be lovely. Let's talk about the technology news, and we won't drown in all the other stuff. So I'll start. I put this, well, okay, but you wanted to start without AI. I had mine ready. I guess this was from a week or so ago, but this was Tom's guide on February 4th. Macs under attack from North Korean malware, stealing passwords and more. How to stay safe. Tom's guide is definitely an excellent resource, a reliable resource. And it says that, hackers are trying to convince you that your microphone and your webcam are under attack. And so particularly if you happen to be searching for a job, Facebook job ads, posing as job recruitment firms, HR representatives, trying to target people when they're at their most vulnerable. So sometimes even trying to set up fake job interviews. But all of it is about trying to get you to click the link that is going to install the malware and deliver the payload, fake video conferencing software. fake Google Meet errors, things that are going to involve you copying and pasting malicious scripts and putting something into the terminal app, supposedly going to fix your camera. Don't do that, folks. You got to be very careful. And there's a reason why now all modern operating systems have a variety of prompts that come up to say, do you give permission for this and to allow for that? And if you are, and I guess in this kind of a scenario, you think you're having a job interview, you're under pressure. Oh my gosh, I've got to fix this. And so maybe somebody's going to do something that they would normally do because, they're under a little bit of stress. But very important to remember that you just don't want to be installing any kind of unknown scripts. These are backdoors and stuff that you can infect your Mac. I mean, back in the day, I think a lot of us were like, "Woo, Windows is the number one target, and I use a Mac, so can't get me." But that's certainly not true anymore. And so just a cautionary tale for not only job hunters, but people who are just, getting messages from folks saying, hey, you need to make sure you install this because your Mac is infected. So have you had any issues with Mac malware in like the last, I don't know, number of years?
No. I've only really had one super serious thing happen to me once, and that was 15 years ago. And I was on actually longer than that now, 18, 19 years ago. I used to have this little tiny PC laptop. It was a little 11-inch laptop before, the kind of vast decrease in size of laptops, so kind of pre the Ultrabook days, and I love that thing. I mean, I carried it around with me everywhere, and it was my constant companion. And I was the only person at my school at the time that was allowed to plug a personal laptop into the network because I had to vet it through everything. And one day, the tech guy comes running down and says that something was pinging an outside server for my laptop that looked weird. And so I probably downloaded, I can't even think of some of the prominent malware. Malwarebytes. I can't remember it. And it discovered a piece of malware on there. And so, I didn't even pause. I just wiped the thing and start over again. And so, I was able to go in that direction. So that's really the only situation that I've been through all this time. But I do use antivirus on my Macs and PCs and my Linux boxes. My preferred tool is Bitdefender, which is very highly rated, and I went through a long research on it. And I do just enough, downloading of random stuff that, and also, I would imagine that like a lot of teachers and school administrators that are prominent on the internet, I imagine that I'm a target. So I utilize that in part to diminish my risk.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and let's remember that probably the biggest risk right now is dangerous actors sponsored by foreign governments. And that's something that very much is at the top of my mind. And as you'd think schools wouldn't be really a target, but I'm not sure why I'm super yawny tonight. But
you're gonna make me yawn over the video.
I know. It's not good. It's not good. Yeah, I'm super conscious about that. And also, every computer I use in any professional context trades in student data, as Dr. Fryer's does too. And, we want to be extra careful about that. But I generally believe that the Mac risk is lower. But then again, I also don't really know what that means, right? Like in the end, even if you're being super careful, on a Mac, there's certainly ways to download nefarious things. And there's kind of the light nefarious things like bad Chrome extensions, which is becoming an increasing problem as well.
Interesting. I put the link into our chat for Bitdefender. They now offer Bitdefender Scameo. So this is an AI scam detector. And so anytime you receive something you think is a little tricky, a little fishy, a little suspicious, a little sus, you can just go ahead and chat with Scameo for free. So I don't think that requires a subscription at all. So the example they give is, getting a text message that's saying from Google, hey, we need your one-time password, to authenticate or whatever. So that is a good use of LLM chatbot. And I guess it's available inside WhatsApp, Discord, Messenger, and yeah, no download, no install. You can just talk to Scamio. There you go. That's good. I have not been running a antivirus for a while. This was 2015. We didn't run antivirus on the Macs that we had at school, and then at some point, a couple years into my tech director tenure, was like, yeah, I think we probably better. I'm in a school now and I think you are in the university as well, where your box is locked and admins are restricting installation of software and things like that. So be careful out there, folks.
Yeah, here. Why don't you cover that other article? Because I know we've talked about the IoT security issues in the past.
Okay. So this one is also under the security tab. This was from Ars Technica. The headline is, many Americans still don't understand how easily IoT devices can get bricked. And so there was some, I think, surveys. Consumer Reports had an American Experiences survey. This was from December of 2024. And they give some data about the survey, respondents and confidence and whatnot. But basically, it was a lot of educated folks and, higher income people. And their report says, among people with any type of connected device, 43% said the last time they purchased one, they were not aware that it might lose software support at some point. Roughly a third of consumers with a connected device, 35%, said that they had been aware their product would lose software support at some point, and 22% said they did not recall. And so basically, the bottom line is we need to help educate our fellow community members about the importance of being able to, or the importance of updating firmware and paying attention to this, because if we are not careful, we could be running devices on our computers that are going to become part of zombie botnets and used in malware attacks and denial of service attacks and all kinds of things. And in terms of getting bricked, that would just mean it doesn't work anymore. So it's not like buying a broom or a shovel. I mean, those kind of things are going to probably work forever and you're not going to ever have to upgrade them. It's a different arena when we talk about Internet of Things devices that connect to the internet. And I know that in our previous house, I had invested in actually some light switches and things that required wiring to put in. And I realized how not smart that was, because in one case, the firmware was actually just in Mandarin. And I mean, I couldn't read it at all. I had watched my Google Nest router, and for some reason, it seemed like my devices periodically, were sending packets out of the network for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, I just, I don't, in our new home that we moved into about 3 years ago, I decided not to install anything that involves wiring. Now that's when we don't have a smart thermostat, so that's obviously going to be an exception to the rule, but not in terms of light switches and stuff. So it's either bulbs that are smart or plugs that lamps and things like that go into. But I'm actually needing to look at this kind of stuff too in terms of updates, because I am using a number of Wyze devices, WYZE. Mm-hmm. And it has a really good, interface where when firmware updates are available in one tap, and they'll go ahead and update. And I did check my Google stuff recently. Most of those are going to update automatically, but yeah, I'm sure that a number of the less expensive direct from Amazon smart plugs and things like that I have may be in need of a firmware update. And I think this is just one area in which we're going to be really, really vulnerable. I mean, you and I can pontificate about this as much as we want on our show, but I don't know that there's going to be, anything that's going to really make a dent in the consciousness of the American public. I do think that regulation can play a role in this, but unfortunately, we are pretty far away from efficient and sensible regulatory regimes in the United States, and I would be really surprised if, in the next few years, we see some reasonable regulation saying, hey, IoT device manufacturers, you are going to have to guarantee a certain number of years or whatever. But even if they do that, who knows what's going to happen? They can get bought, they can get sold, etc. So are you dedicated and religious in your updating of IoT devices? And how many devices would you estimate now, Dr. Neiffer, you have at your own domicile that connect to the internet to do something?
Well, I have less than I used to in my home, in part because the reliability, especially for, I was like everyone else in the early IoT days, and when things started coming down in price, I would usually purchase only because it was compatible with my chosen ecosystem. And I think all of our stuff at home now is on HomeKit, the Apple stuff, because that's the platform my wife and I share together. I mentioned last week that I installed a Home Assistant operating system box in my parents' home in order to have some stuff talk to each other, like a couple of cameras and sensors. So we've got stuff around the house for a couple of specific reasons. But the thing that's interesting to me about that is that I've become to believe something in the last a couple of years that I think applies to this. I think the rule should be that you can always delete the software on your devices. Like you can just wipe it and start over again with a third-party software, right? And I realized how difficult that is. But a long time ago, we had an article that Samsung was considering allowing their end-of-life phones. You could just download a patch from Samsung and they would allow you to wipe and use that device for anything. And I love that because that could be such a fodder for maker spaces and computer science classrooms and geeks and the things you could do with it. But I have a couple of IoT devices that admittedly were super discount bargain 5-6 years ago that just don't work at all anymore because the company folded and didn't have a scenario to deal with that. But it should be that if we buy the hardware, and I get that we're buying a hardware and a licensed software, but you should be able to delete that software and start over again. And I'll give you a very specific example of this where this is negatively impacting me. I have a 2015 Ford Escape. I'm sorry, I have a 2014 Ford Escape that, in fact, it's going to hit 100,000 miles in the next week or two, and it's been a good car for me. No major repairs. I get my oil changed. It's synthetic, so every 6,000 miles, and it's fine. But one of the reasons why I was excited about the car, I guess it would be 11 years ago now, and it's not as exciting anymore, is because the car had a modern like screen-based entertainment system. And what I really want to be able to do is hook up my phone via Bluetooth without having to have a bunch of wacky adapters to do that. And the system in there is called Ford Sync, and it was fine, right? But then a year or two later, everything is getting updated to CarPlay and Android Auto, and no update available for my car. And worse, I would happily go get a third-party system that's got Android Auto or CarPlay on it, but you can't. My particular model, and it's not even all for 2014 Ford Escapes, it's my particular model. You can't get in and pull the existing system out and put a third-party one in. And the features just keep dying on there. First, they took away there's a system where you could sign up and get maintenance reports from the car. So I think it's like 2,000 or 3,000 miles, it would dial up. It would get on your cell phone, and it's almost like a fax. It would send a little audio report that would then get emailed to you after they analyze the data. Which I thought was pretty nifty. That's not available anymore. It still tries to call every 2,000 or 3,000 miles, and then the message on the other end is that this, per your agreement, this service has been depreciated, so that's gone. It doesn't work very well as a phone with my iOS device because, as it turns out, to talk to Siri, it basically treats it like a phone call. So it takes
our 2018 Sequoia does that too. Same thing.
It drives me nuts. And and it should be that if you're not going to support the software anymore, that I should be able just to wipe it. And I'm not. I don't know why that popped up, but I should just be able to wipe it, right? And then install something. And if you had that ability, there would be a huge community around building things for that. In the same way, this article mentions the car thing from Spotify that was released a couple of times, or I'm sorry, like a year or so ago, and then like after 6 months, they announced that they were going that it wasn't selling, I think, or something, so they decided to get rid of it. But they allowed you, they opened up the source on it and allowed people to go in, and people create all sorts of cool things with car things. And, I think that should be available to us as end users. And I get why they don't want us to do that. And the planned obsolescence of these devices is certainly a big part of the marketing. But this stuff drives me a little crazy. But, every time you install an IoT device, that's a computer, right?
Yeah.
It has a networking on it. It has a processor in it. It has storage on it, which means it could very much be like planting, a little bomb inside your network.
Yeah, it can ping stuff. Well, maybe the farmers and agriculture industry, could be a help, because I know the right to repair fights continue. We've talked about some EFF articles with that, and this idea that, hey, you buy this combine or tractor or whatever, you should be allowed to work on it, install software, and shouldn't just be a hostage to the companies. It's a little bit of a similar thing. On a related note, I'll mention that we got on fiber here in our neighborhood early in the fall. It's been great. I'm on a plan for 500 synchronous, megabits per second. So half a gig up, half a gig down. And previous cable modem was limited to 30 megs up. So that's a huge speed increase, especially on the upload side. But one of the things that's allowed me to do is have a separate network. So I used to have everything on the same network on the Google Nest, and I still have that. But the Wi-Fi is faster on the 5G that comes from the cell network. And this is something that I've heard, from an enterprise standpoint, you absolutely have segmented networks. You don't today want a flat network where, somebody can just jack in and have access to everything, your servers and printers and security systems and all that kind of stuff. So a modern enterprise network is going to be subnetted to limit access to different devices, and certainly not allow guest users, but even your regular users, that kind of access. On a home network, I have read that is another best practice, to have all of your IoT stuff on this one network and then separate it.
Yeah.
Difficulty is then you have trouble controlling it. Even tonight, I'm using my continuity camera with my iPhone 13 or whatever, and it wouldn't connect to Chrome. And I was like, oh yeah, it's because it's on the wrong Wi-Fi. And like to control our Apple TVs, we got to be on that same network. So I don't know. I don't know that I've experienced a real performance boost when, I'm on the faster Wi-Fi. It's so fast that it doesn't really seem to matter. So anyway, such are the things that IoT, geeks sometimes fret about, which probably most people are like, what the heck are you talking about? We don't care about that stuff. But
yeah, totally.
It is totally important to be aware of what's on your network and think about taking responsibility for it. And I do think we should follow, not only right to repair legislation, but also IoT legislation. And we should still aspire to have reasonable, regulation. And that can include, trying to do things that can prevent people from just abandoning their devices. But when somebody goes out of business, I mean, I don't know what the right regulations are. There's probably not just a regulatory solution. A big part of this has to do with consumers and consumer behavior. So anyway, this is just a reminder to everybody that it's a good idea to periodically audit all your devices. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to see if things need to update. And if something hasn't had an update in a few years, maybe even though it's working, you might want to retire it and get a newer device that's going to have supported firmware.
I would also note too, I know folks that, an IoT device stops working and they don't immediately, pull the plug on it. If something stops working for you, get it off your network, unplug it, pull a battery, whatever it is that you need to do, because the bottom line is that's a huge risk, right? Because, it's not providing you any function. And if it's broken, it could be because it's deliberately broken as part of some kind of attack. And again, we don't want to make you paranoid, but, it's a dangerous world out there.
On a related note, what is the update on your Raspberry Pi ad blocker Pi-hole? Have you pursued that anymore?
Yeah, and I had to get so it's been really interesting because it's been, well, at least 10 years since I've played with a Raspberry Pi. So I probably would have played with them a little bit more during the pandemic, but as it turns out, they went into a huge shortage during the pandemic. But one of the things that I figured out was that I needed I got it up and running. It mostly worked. But then I started reading that, especially when you're using it as an appliance like that to block ads, it's going to be running a lot of information on your micro SD card. And if you're using, it's not even just a cheap micro SD card, unless you're using one that's built around performance and built around multiple reads and writes, then sometimes these can last less than 6 months. And because
Really?
my
Oh, wow.
yeah, and because I'm using this, where I'm setting this up right now is my parents' house. The last thing I want is the Raspberry Pi to stop working, and then the way Pi-hole works is that it becomes your DNS server. So so you point all of your devices to this in your DNS network, and if I'm not here and it breaks, it's not like I can come running and fix it, right? So
you do have a few other device boxes, sitting around.
Yeah,
so
I
could
do. Yeah.
something else, so.
Yeah, well, and I have, as a matter of fact, and the Home OS, for example. In fact, I had a box I was about to finally send to the salvage that had a second generation i5 chip in it, and what I figured out was that actually that's perfect for Home OS with less than 100 devices. I was like, well, if I ever get to the point where I have 100 devices, perhaps I have a problem I need to deal with. So yeah, I do like to experiment with the stuff, as many of you know.
It reminds me, this has been an aside, but this is a crazy story from Tech Director. So our middle school needed our HVAC system updated, and there was a not on the internet directly, but a modem connected Windows 2000 box that went out, and it was the controller for our entire HVAC system in our middle school. And so I had to, and I think, I don't know if this is when I was by myself, because I was by myself for like 6 months without an assistant. Maybe I don't know. I think maybe it wasn't. But anyway, we got on eBay, found an old machine, and we needed a new. I think we needed the power supply for it or something. But anyway, replaced it, got that thing hobbling along, and then finally it got replaced by something new. But when you're going into sort of, it wasn't the attic, but it was one of the supply closets, and it's like, oh look, here's the Windows 2000 box that still controls all the HVAC in 2018 or something crazy.
Yeah,
enterprise can have that sort of thing happen as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, what else would you like to talk about tonight?
Let's see here. Let's go to the Google piece here, and I actually read this fact elsewhere, and the link I found quickly is something called World Screens. So who knows how? Because I've never heard of this website before, but I know this is true because I read it on a mainstream source yesterday. But YouTube has announced a stat that I actually think is pretty stunning, and we are now at the 20-year anniversary of YouTube, which is really interesting. But YouTube is now used more on big screens than it is on small screens. And by big screens, we mean televisions, right? And I'm not sure why this intrigued me so much. In part, maybe it's just because we've been kind of programmed the last 15 years of the phone and tablet era to think that everyone wants portable. But at the same time, if you've been in a Costco or Sam's Club recently, that the big televisions are right there in front. By the way, I have a life hack to share with everyone. Go to Costco 20 minutes after the Super Bowl starts, and no one will be there on a Sunday. It's the most amazing thing.
It's a great night to be on a date night. My wife,
that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, it's a glorious night. You're just like, no wait, you got the whole
Yeah.
place to yourself. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it was. You could hear our voices echo. It was so in there. But so I walk in, and there's 110-inch television, right?
What?
4K, like $1,800, which I'm not a real like television snob or anything, right? I feel just fine with the TCL television, or I don't need a super fancy television, but I do watch a lot of YouTube, as it turns out, and I watch it primarily on a larger device, my home TV, and it's not uncommon for me on a Saturday morning to drink coffee for a couple hours and watch the guy I watch that refurbishes old tools, and now it's an AI news video or two, and I lots of cooking channels. In fact, I'm a Patreon of like six or seven different cooking channels now, because I try to believe in or try to practice what I preach in regards to sharing with creators. But the bottom line is that this was really stunning to me, but it feels like that's like it's some kind of cultural thing. I can't wrap my brain around what it is, but that shift is super interesting, and I think that kind of goes against the conventional wisdom of the media in your pocket that we've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah, no, I think it's a real milestone. And especially if this doesn't, if this isn't an anomaly and we just, and then go back to more mobile minutes. But I don't think so. I think this has to do with the rise in popularity of Apple TV, of Roku, Chromecast, these devices, and smart televisions too, right? I bet when you're in Costco looking at those TVs, probably every single one of those is a smart television that has the YouTube app built directly into it. And so the maturity of the television market and the smart TV market, which of course is all about tracking and surveillance, um, that's a big part of it, because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that was not the case. And if you wanted to, connect a PC or a phone or a tablet or whatever to your phone, it wasn't, or to connect those things to your television, it was not such a straightforward thing. And even periodically going to use some Airbnbs or vacation rentals by owner, they're all set up with the TV and the streaming service, and just click here and put in your Netflix password, and if we wanted to do YouTube or whatever. So I think that's the maturity of the hardware, as well as the really strong incentive that these companies have, frankly, to track us and to get our data, because there's a lot of money in the data economy, and every time we are using a smart device, and probably almost any device, unless you're being very careful and intentional, you're contributing to your digital footprint online. So,
Yeah.
do
Well,
you
and
use
the other thing I would
do you
note
use a
is,
Chromecast anymore, or are you 100% Apple TV for TV
no,
computing?
of course, I have both. So I have an Android TV, and part of it's they sell the little $20 Android TV sticks at Walmart now that are actually super amazing. And I was able to pick up. In fact, I carry one in my luggage now that I'll like Apple's really paying attention of what I'm doing
You
today.
are
So
really, yeah. And I'm trying to. I turned on my reactions, and my phone for whatever reason doesn't want to respond. Hey, look at that!
yeah.
Ooh.
Um, so I used to carry around Fire Sticks for that, but I'll be real honest. The Amazon ecosystem has really gone downhill in the last 2 or 3 years. They're just not keeping an eye on it anymore, and I hate to say this because it's a little weird, but if you are looking for budget devices in the Android universe, the ON tablets, ONN tablets at Walmart are really good. It's got almost stock Android on them. They're metal, so they have a nice they have a nice feel to them, and they're not the fastest ones ever. But I bought the little 8-inch. Let me see if it's sitting in here somewhere. I bought the little 8-inch on tablet for like $50 on sale, and that's my, that's my light carry. If I'm traveling and don't want to bring an iPad with me, I just bring that now, and it's super great, right? But you can buy the on Android TV stick at Walmart for $20. The fancy one, the one with a big processor in it that is pretty smooth, is only $50, which means it's half the price of or more than half the price of it, or less than half the price of an Apple TV. But yeah, I do both, and I still think it's pretty hard to beat the elegance of Chromecast. It never took off, I think, and it still works because the Chromecast button is still everywhere. But yeah, I mean, I love YouTube, and there are so many creators that have somewhere between 50 and 100,000 subscribers that are pretty niche, but they're good at making videos. They're entertaining, they're informative. I also follow several creators that are kind of well-known brands, but yeah, it's a pretty great space. So if anything, it just kind of feels like people are more like me now, that I sitting down and watching their YouTube on a television.
I've been consistently unable to find an app on Apple TV for, Google photo slideshows. And there's different developers. I think most of them are coming from China, and, low ratings, and but they don't work. And, anyway, we're still both, but I definitely love my Google Photos and the smart albums that I've been able to create. And Apple, I don't like how Apple TV, when you do highlights, it's all AI based. It's all random. You can pick specific albums, but in terms of like those highlights and things, anyway, it's not quite as robust in some ways as the Google Photos ecosystem. So interesting. Things continue to march on. But I agree with you. I think that's a pretty substantial statistic, and probably one that is not going to change. We like to consume media with large screens, and now that we've got so many, smart television options and things like that to do, it's probably not going to change. Well, we probably need to talk about DeepSeek. I don't think we've talked about that at all. Since,
we didn't. Yeah.
We probably dive in.
Sure. So, I did mention this at the end of the show last week because I felt duty obligated to mention this, the difference between the app and the model. But to kind of tell the overall story, to bring us where we are right now, and chances are, even if you don't pay attention to AI, you've probably seen all the hand wringing around DeepSeek. But DeepSeek is an AI subsection of a larger company in China that is it's a venture capital company, and they do have a ton of hardware assets. But DeepSeek has been around for a while. There's been a DeepSeek 2 and a DeepSeek 1, but in December, DeepSeek released something referred to as version 3, and version 3 itself was seemed like on face value a good model, but that's not what has caused all of the hubbub. It's that it's a good model that they've open sourced, and they claim that they were able to do the training of the model. So that's the processing that's required in order to take a model and make it functional for the way we expect AI to be functional, and did it for just a handful of millions of dollars. That number keeps changing, and the story keeps changing. But what they released as part of a research paper, they're not hiding this information. They kind of changed the way they set up the model. Now, the narrative has changed so many times in the last 6 weeks as people kind of go back and forth with this. First, that it may have trained directly off of just having the DeepSeek model talk to ChatGPT-4 and train off the output. Some people say that this is a phenomenon of the U.S. block of advanced AI chips to China, and so they use older, less functional AI chips, so they were able to do it more cheaply. And so, in other words, they innovated due to scarcity. And then they went ahead and released a new model in January that's competitive with the O1 and O3 model from ChatGPT, and those are the reasoning models. And not only did they not put that behind a paywall, you can go use DeepSeek for free without paying a dime. They also did something that OpenAI refused to when they first released their reasoning models. They actually show you the reasoning process, which was such a controversy for OpenAI that when people were trying to get it to tell the reasoning, they would actually shut off accounts, or threaten to shut off accounts for doing that. So this led to some stock drama, which I'm sure, even if you're not paying attention, you probably heard of that. Companies like NVIDIA, Microsoft, OpenAI, all very much were seen as perhaps not needing the gazillions of dollars they claim they've needed. So, all that is a kind of an interesting part of the story. But what's also happened is that there's now been a lot of, and in fact, I know some fellow state virtual schools that have ruled that no employees can use DeepSeek, that they've specifically barred, not unlike the TikTok thing in the last couple of years. And I've seen some of these documents announcing some of these changes, and it was because the website uses your grabs your IP address, and the website grabs your computer, and the website keeps track of your chats. Now, of course, so does Facebook. Right. And so does Instagram. And so does Meta AI and OpenAI. I mean, everyone does this. But the concern, of course, is that because there seems to be an extremely blurry line between commerce and the government in China, that people worry about where that data goes. Now, that said, right, like a lot of people that don't really care about the international intrigue have downloaded not DeepSeek the app, right? And by the way, to be clear, I haven't downloaded the app either. I'm not interested in the app. I have used the website before, and it's chat on the website. But the way I've used DeepSeek is the companies that host models, and I've mentioned OpenRouter several times on the show. That's I'm still somehow using the same $15 I paid to OpenRouter in, I think it was October, and I hammer that thing almost every day, and I still haven't got through my $15 of credit yet. But DeepSeek is one of the models they host, and it's an open source model, so you can download it, and it's not like, well, you can install it on a computer. It's a little complicated, and you need a pretty beefy computer. But the point is that I've used it, and of course the model comes with compromises, right? The first thing I did within seconds is of using it was I asked it about Tiananmen Square, right? Which and then it avoided the conversation completely and said I'm not programmed to talk about that. The same is also true of many of the AI pieces, and I think that's part of the problem. So that's where we're at right now.
My contribution to this is going to be an article and a podcast. So I discovered a new podcast called China Talk, and listened yesterday and today to a wonderful interview with Dario Amodei, who is the CEO of Anthropic, which has Claude. And so this is an October 2024 article that he wrote called Machines of Loving Grace. And I have not gotten through the entire thing. I've actually started listening to it. I think it's like 54 pages or something. It's going to take like an hour and 15 minutes to listen to on Pocket. But it starts to go into a lot of depth with, the ways in which AI is progressing. He has, I think, 5 different areas where AI is really going to shine in its positive potential. But in the podcast, which again is, and I'll drop this link into, it's a podcast called China Talk, and this is the February 5th edition. Have you heard of this one before or listened to this one?
Are we talking about the hard fork episode about China Talk? Or China Talk itself?
This is called China Talk. So this is an interview that they did with him. One of the things that was pretty surprising that I hadn't read or whatever elsewhere is that DeepSeek absolutely has the worst scores ever on guardrail protections against things like bioweapons. And so one of the things that he goes into in terms of concerns about this is, for most of the leading AI companies that have frontier models. Most of those are U.S. companies, and they're going to be compliant with U.S. law, and they're going to, at least at this point, they're generally respectful of guidelines, and they don't just want to turn a blind eye to something like, hey, how can I create bioweapons for genocide or terrible things like that. And so he mentions that DeepSeek had the worst the results on that of anything that they've tested in terms of a frontier model. And as you pointed out, the thing that's pretty remarkable about this, although it's somewhat obfuscated and we don't know exactly how much money was used and exactly the chips that were used, but a team from China was able to pull off, without the latest NVIDIA chips, an AI training model that could be considered to be frontier level. But in this article, Machines of Grace, and in this podcast, Modi is talking about so many different things, but it includes how important international governance is and collaboration. And we can debate about whether AGI is going to come about or just how long it's going to take. He talks about having, what is it, like is it a city of Nobel Prize winners, or just like it's a server farm, like, having a really large building of everybody is a Nobel Prize winner in terms of their knowledge and their capacity to do things. And AI is going to be able to give us this kind of capability. And then at some point, you're not going to be able to, keep the genie in the bottle. But he's asserting that we have about 2 years of lead time on the Chinese AI models, and that's what this put into question, was whether or not we really do have those 2 years. But it is so important for us to work and collaborate internationally. Of course, we need to get our governance just domestically figured out, so that we can have reasonable laws and reasonable regulations and things like that. But in the era of AI, he makes a pretty persuasive case that most, if not all of us, are vastly underestimating the potential for good and the potential for bad with these kinds of models. So I did download the app for DeepSeek. I don't know that I've really used it much. I haven't played with it that much. I'm still just kind of moving between Claude and ChatGPT, and every once in a while dabbling with Gemini, but I think this is really, I'm going to go ahead and listen to or read that entire article, and to hear, I was telling my wife, to have access like this, because the podcast is about 45 minutes long, but here's the CEO of Anthropic, one of the absolute leading AI companies, and then to be able to hear him reflect in very layman's terms and understandable language, not super arcane or difficult to understand language, about a whole host of different issues, is just, it's unbelievably wonderful to me. And while it's difficult to be in this fractured and polluted information environment with all this crazy, all the news and all the headlines and everything, we are not living in the 1930s and 40s where we just had the radio channel and we had such limited access to channels of information. So I enjoyed listening to that and hearing his take on it. And China is going to be a leader in AI. They already are. And whether or not we have a 2-year lead or not, we're going to need to work together. And instead of just framing this as we just got to beat the Chinese, we're just going to use export controls and we're just going to try to, stop them. And, we've got to have an eye for international collaboration. Are we going to go to war in Taiwan in 2027? I don't know. A lot of people think we are, and it seems like we're gearing up for that. But we also, in the long term, need to be figuring out how to regulate and manage AI in the same way that we've managed nuclear weapons, on the planet since 1945.
Yeah, so true. And I've seen a couple references in the last couple of days. I've been sent some articles where people are kind of doubting the overall impact of AI, and I understand that cynicism for sure, right? But I think the more important piece to me is that the the trillions of dollars that are being invested in this, right, itself makes things change, right? And I'm not saying that we should always follow the investment, but that even if AI ends, it's not going to be a bust for sure, right? If AI stops evolving right now, we've got tool sets that I think change so much about the way we interact with data and technology that we'd be hard pressed to keep up with that. But at the same time, for sure, yeah, it's gonna bring a change. And I don't think you need to pick up too many classic sci-fi novels to know that having computers that can act autonomously, that can replicate themselves. That news has been kicking around the last couple of weeks too. That's something we have to be super thoughtful about. Period. End of story.
And we really need to be careful about those tropes or whatever the sci-fis and the cliches and the things that we have in our mind because of movies that we've watched and novels that have been written and things like that. And I really recommend this article because I just think he's putting things in a more reasonable perspective. And we always want to simplify things. We always want to try and, connect the new to the old and to the known, but it really is some different headspace to think about. And, it's one of the things I enjoy about getting to do with you pretty much every week, Jason, is look at these articles and turn them over and then think about, well, what the heck does this mean? And I will tell you, as someone who is teaching coding and about to start teaching AP computer, it's, there's a lot more to AP computer science I'm learning than just, scripting and coding. But
yeah,
when you use these tools to write scripts and codes, there is absolutely no doubt in your mind that this is a superpower granting tool. And as the Anthropic CEO talks about, with the agentic age and with these devices being able to, soon do tasks and things that might take hours and hours and days, and it may require them, actually doing things on the internet. And eventually there'll probably be systems that, they'll be able to build robots and replicating things. But the knowledge base and the capacity that we have today is just, it's so earth shattering. And so I definitely believe this is something we need to find ways in our communities and neighborhoods to help us process this more, because it's just not enough to have a news headline, say whatever it's going to be, to get our head wrapped around it. Any more AI play dates actually scheduled in Montana? Are you all?
3, as a matter of fact. We're going to do one in March, one in April, and probably one either late May or early June. And if we're currently in the middle of some negotiations with our friends, the legislature, but they are interested in helping drive the conversation in AI. And what is interesting about that is we will probably continue the AI Playdate model, but just across the state. And I think that's something that could be super interesting. So
absolutely, that's fantastic. All right, well, we only have about 40 more AI articles. So what else would you like to pick up on, or do you want to extend more of the DeepSeek stuff?
No, let's move on from DeepSeek. A couple of interesting things that have happened. First, I released a LinkedIn and Blue Sky post earlier this week that actually picked up a lot of traction. But I had discovered that the podcast feature of Notebook LM has caught a lot of people's imaginations, and I also agree that a lot of people are using it to try to produce podcasts that get released as podcast. I don't know how smart that is, but or actually maybe it's not even smart, it's how effective that is, right? I don't know if that provides us what we're looking for. But if you like that feature and you don't want to mess with the kind of I guess hacking of Notebook LM that's required to make that happen, Google has a tool that's called a Google Illuminate. That it's just a podcast feature, and you can share up to 4 links. And what's interesting about it is that the interface is really advanced. Not only can you choose what it is that you're trying to talk about, again, up to 4 links, but you can pick a casual conversation, a formal conversation, a guided conversation, a free-form conversation, and depending on which model you choose, there's multiple voices that are not the two voices that are in the Notebook LM podcast. So that itself is pretty great because those two voices are wearing on me already just a little bit. And you get a really, really kind of powerful interface to do that. And, Vicki Davis of Cool Cat Teacher fame had reposted my post and said that, she was concerned that people were using this to produce podcasts. And I couldn't agree more that that's not the direction we want to go into. These are a really great self-learning tool, however, and I also think it's a really great strategy, especially when you have students that have higher learning needs that maybe need another resource available to them to help process and evaluate content. I also think too that there is really something to giving yourself agency to learn something, right? I'm somewhat I put some pretty silly things in Notebook LM just to see what it would do, including the 1988 Ames, Iowa phone book and county marriage records from Baltimore County from the 50s and 60s, and a high school yearbook from some high school in 1926. Silly stuff. It actually will vamp and banter, a whole 20-30 minutes on whatever you give it. In fact, the worst one was I put a source in that was behind a Google login wall, so it wasn't able to get it. So all it did was capture the Google login page, and it managed to create a 10-minute podcast about the Google login page. So talk about just, making hot air appear out of nowhere. But it is extremely interesting to me that these tools exist. And I think they're really great, self-learning pieces. Now, that said, I'm still an occasional TikTok user. There's a couple of voices that I recognize as 11 Lab voices. They're part of the standard issue 11 Lab AI voices. There's one to describe that I wish I could come up with a description of how it sounds, but it's got this very like announcy overtone, and it's on. Like 10% of TikToks are AI generated voices in my experience.
Wow.
And and they mispronounce things.
Right.
And we don't want a bunch of AI generated content. I don't.
But you know
mind
what?
creators
That's what
using
we're going to
AI.
get. That's what Meta
Yeah.
and I mean, I think it was Hard Fork maybe was talking about this. That that's what we're getting. They are embracing the AI created content to see if people will be engaged. And what is it? Just like sort of the endless scroll.
Mhm.
I did my first Google LM podcast this evening, actually, where I used the break in and join feature. Have you done that yet with one of them?
I have, yeah, and it's so weird, right? And interesting, but the first time I did it to demonstrate something else, it was to my wife and in-laws, and we'd actually put in a lawnmower manual in there. And so they talked for a long time on safety, right? And so they would say things like, you should never drink the battery acid. So I would jump in and say, wait a second, I'm really thirsty. Should I drink the battery acid? And it got a little pissed after a couple minutes, right? Because it was clearly
Really?
annoyed. Yeah. And then a couple weeks later, there was an article about how one of the things that Google's had to really work on is the AI not getting annoyed with its human guest.
Oh, wow. How fascinating.
Yeah.
What I experienced was that it seemed to be a little bit of an acknowledgement to what you said, but it really didn't derail what they were already talking about and what the plan was. So I uploaded 2 articles from Dario Amodi, and then jumped in and I also asked 2 things, and it totally skipped the first one and only went with the second one. So anyway, it's first iteration, and it also doesn't record what you did. I was thinking maybe it would record you into the podcast, and it doesn't. It will respond to you, and so, but it is kind of fascinating, right? It's this idea of interactive notes, and so I think that kind of technology is just going to going to continue. And especially like, think about this, like, okay, here are the chapters, that we're going to be tested on. Go ahead and give me a quick, quick little test to, identify my gaps. Okay, great. And if those are my gaps, then let's go ahead and work together on, trying to, work some practice problems or ask me more, and, being able to hone in on things that you don't understand, and basically just, the interactive textbook, right? Put the textbook in, and then suddenly it becomes an interactive textbook that can be differentiated and customized to your knowledge or knowledge gaps. Crazy.
Well, and I keep thinking about like the example I used. I was actually talking to a group of teachers on Monday about Notebook LM, and one of the things that I said was that, I think of it this way, right? It is an amazing self-learning tool, and one way I might choose to use it is, if you're the type of teacher that likes to listen about cutting edge research and education, that was the teacher I was, and the administrator I still am. And I also go outside to walk my dog, right? And so have it put together 20 minutes about this stuff. And the campy banter I wish would go away. But other than that, that's really useful to me.
What banter?
The campy banter.
Oh, yeah.
that comes with the model.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's any worse than the Up First podcast from the New York Times or NPR. I think it's NPR, and it does a pretty good job of covering the big picture of whatever it is you give it, and there's utility in that, right? Do I want all my media like that? No, I do not. But that's not where I see these tools being most powerful. It's a self agency tool, right? Like giving yourself the ability to process information in a way that you want to hear it, or process it, I should say.
Talk about Canva and Leonardo real quick, because that article is actually from the summer, from July. So have you played much with the AI Canva tool?
Well, I have, and I was kind of hoping that they would integrate Leonardo inside of Canva, because Canva's image generators are not great. They feel very much like like early 2023 Midjourney, or like DALL-E 2, which wasn't very good at all, actually. And so it's not quite there yet. So I always import images from elsewhere, but Leonardo, one of the things that it offers is access to Flux, which is the Black Forest Lab models out of Germany that do a really great image generation job. And you can do 5 or 6 image requests a day for free, and then you can pay $10 or more a month to get access to it. I only share it because I'm hoping that becomes part of the grander Canva library at some point. And I do pay for a Canva Pro account. I have access to my school one, which is a de facto Pro account, but I use it so much in so many different contexts that are outside of school that's an easy check for me to write every year to go to Canva. But it's a really great model. And if you are looking, for a pay model, I still think Ideogram at $20 a month is probably a better value, because Ideogram is nothing short of amazing. But I am really excited that Canva is continuing the development of Leonardo, and hopefully at some point it becomes part of its larger services.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can continue to encourage people to share at least the AI specific tools that people are paying for. I was finding it interesting with the last hard fork that, Casey Newton, I think, pays for the Claude Professional, which was like $200. And then, but Kevin Roos is sticking with ChatGPT, and, I think their question was, if you only had one tool. They started Tool Time as a part of their show. But that's very valuable to just hear what people are paying for. And I learned about Ideogram from you. And I've been a subscriber, I don't know, maybe for a year now. I use it, multiple times a week, sometimes every day. And it just is, it's stunningly good. And when you've been using different tools and you can compare and things like that, you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. But I'm glad to know about Leonardo AI, and we're Canva users at our school. And so yes, anytime we're going to have integration into the Google Suite and into Canva and these kinds of existing platforms, that's really going to be very positive to take the classroom school approach that say, hey, this is built in. It's not a third-party tool we got to get permission to use or whatever. It's just, it's built into Google, which, by the way, I need to play with Google Video that's built in. Have you played with that yet?
Google Vids, yeah, I have. It's pretty good. It's still early days, right? And I would imagine that actually most of these Google tools will be in the graveyard, yes, they pull the functionality into other pieces. But yeah, I think Google made a lot of progress in 2024 catching up with OpenAI.
Yeah, interesting.
Well,
We don't. Yeah, we still
we're
don't have access to that in our Google domain, but it
yeah.
is on my personal. So
We are clearly past our hour. I just want to
we
make a
are.
couple of a couple other just quick notes here. First, last week's hard fork was really good. You mentioned the tool time segment, which I thought was super interesting, but another great episode. And I would also recommend that if you haven't take a look at their episode where they feature the Adobe Creative partnership executive. It's only about 20 minutes of time as part of the podcast, but it was a really fascinating, interesting look at creativity and how Adobe sees AI fitting into that. And I'm not. I mean, I do have access to the suite at the university. Adobe continues its long stretch of making the tools very available in higher ed and not as available in K-12. But so being on a higher ed campus has an advantage there. But with all the work they're doing on intellectual property, I might be an Adobe customer at some point for image generation, since you're kind of putting all those rules in place. But I would strongly suggest that those episodes are worth your time. The other one I'm going to mention, or the other thing I'm going to mention, is that Late Chat for Mixtral was released in the past week. I'd love to talk about it in detail next week, but there are a lot of countries making interesting plays now for AI. And the interesting part about a French model, in my opinion, is that there's so many more regulations in Europe than there are in the United States or China, for that matter, that if Mixtral becomes a competitive model, it seems to me that might be an interesting play for those that are very sensitive to data privacy, because I would assume that Mixtral is following a lot more rules than almost anyone else is in creating their AI models. But we can talk about that next week.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay. How about a geek of the week?
Well, I have just a quick one here. Something I discovered that's actually very interesting. I've always been a huge fan of LibreOffice, which is the free open source Office suite. But I've discovered one recently that's also free for individuals that you can just download. That's actually better, in my opinion, than LibreOffice and feels a lot more like Microsoft Office. It's called OnlyOffice. You can get it at onlyoffice.com. The reason why it's interesting is because they also have a cloud edition, and the downloadable version talks to the cloud edition. And the free cloud edition is pretty minimalistic. Kind of reminds me of a 20 years ago a Google account, right? Not a ton of storage or anything on there, but if you're looking for, and it works on Linux, Mac, PC, and it's like I was using the Excel knockoff today. I shouldn't call it a knockoff, the spreadsheet edition on there, and I would have had a hard time, in part because I don't use 96% of Excel's advanced features. I would have had a hard time telling the difference between that and Excel. So onlyoffice.com and check it out. Pretty good stuff.
Awesome. Mine actually is a Adobe product. So Adobe has a new free feature, part of Adobe Express. I don't know that it has a separate name. It's just called Animate Your Voice for Free. But we're doing our oral history unit right now in my computer apps class. And there's a little simple tool called Vocaroo, which is just a web-based, free, no login, audio recorder. And so that was what I was teaching the kids to use initially. But this is fun. You cannot upload a file. You have to actually record on their website, but it's free to use. Just, regular Adobe account. It's a little bit silly. Alan Levine actually sent me a message on Mastodon, like, what is the quality of this? Is this really adding to, whatever? And this is just formative audio recording. But I think that the ability to record your voice and be able to share that, and then being able to do that, in a fun way with, different characters and voices and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm a middle
Well,
school teacher.
and
That has
yeah,
some
and
has
to be clear,
some appeal.
and to be clear, Dr. Fryer has been the play with media guy for longer than I've known him, right? And I think there needs to be silly stuff, right? Like not everything is intended to make a international media splash. I think we need silly stuff. I dressed up as with my buddy Mike at work. We dressed up as the Super Mario Brothers. I was Luigi. For Halloween, and I downloaded the video game soundboard, which had all the little Super Mario 3 sounds in it, the bling bling bling, and so I would just walk around the office playing my soundboard all day as I walked around in my overalls. And is that silly? Yeah. Did I get some good laughs? Yeah. Did I win the costume contest? Yes. So
There you go.
it's silly, right? It's okay to be silly. Silly's fun.
Yeah, it is. It is. All right. Well, where can folks find you when we are not running, 10 minutes over on a Wednesday
night? You can find me at aicentrist.com.
All right. And I am at westfryer.com. This has been the EdTech Situation Room. We are a mostly weekly Wednesday night podcast and would love for you to join us live. We are a bit behind on our edtechsr.com posts, but you can always see the archives right on our YouTube channel. So you can just go to youtube.com/@ the @ symbol, EdTechSR. We do have a link to that on our EdTechSR website where you can link to our show notes. And we do have a Substack. And like I said, we're a little behind on that, but I am going to eventually get caught up. And I think Substack's fantastic. I don't know if you're using that much, Jason, but it's become a regular part of my reading, and being able to put the video in there is kind of cool, and started to do that. So thank you all for joining. We encourage you to subscribe, tell others about us, and please subscribe or follow us, whatever, on Facebook, because once we get to 100 likes there, we can stream live on Facebook. And truly, folks, that will be the breakthrough moment when we're just going to we're going nationwide. So get ready for it. Until next time.
Good night.